Hi guys. In this video, we will be exploring some of the slightly more advanced features of Google Sheets. So far, we've learned how to input data and do basic mathematical operations, add numbers, subtract numbers, divide and multiply. But obviously, spreadsheets can do much, much more. And in this spreadsheet, which I would like you to make a copy of and follow along to make sure you get the same answers, we're going to explore 4 of the more kind of slightly more advanced features. So I have, again, some student information, and every student has a student number, and for each student, they have a number of absences. And we're going to pretend this is a large class, and this is where spreadsheets start to shine. Again, if it was just a small class with a small amount of data, it wouldn't be very hard to pick out certain big numbers or small numbers. But when you start dealing with large amounts of information, things don't stand out as easily. But we're going to do or use some of these functions I have on the left, on the right, to help us analyze this information a little more. Okay, the sum function. So the sum function is for adding up large groups of numbers. I could do this the old way, which was hit the equal sign, and then B2 plus B3 plus B4, all the way to B30. So this is where we're going to work smarter, not harder. We're going to use the sum function, and Google is going to actually help us out with that. So we're going to add up the total number of absences for all of these students. So how do I do that? Well, I start just like I would start a formula, with the equal sign. And then I'm going to type in exactly what it has already suggested to me. Sum B2, which is the first cell, and then I'm going to put in a colon and then B30. So what that tells you, B2 colon B30 is, I want to add every number starting with B2 all the way to B30. We call that a range. So again, I want to add up every number from B2 to B30 in that range. And then I need a close bracket. So equals sum bracket B2 colon B30. And then I enter 266. So again, that was much faster and much easier than having to add up all those student absences one by one. Next thing, I want to find the average or the mean of a large group of numbers. So I could do this by, again, adding up all the numbers and then dividing them by the number of numbers, or I can just work smarter and use the average function. So still starting.
If you're in the building, can you call 5904?
So starting with an equal sign and then average. And then we're going to look for the average for the same range of numbers, B2 to B30. So I want to find the average of all of those numbers in that range. So the average number of classes missed by this group of students in this class is 9.172. Okay, next thing, the maximum function. That's where we're looking for the largest number. So I could look at every individual number and just remember off the top of my head which one was the biggest, or I could just use the max function. So this one's a little shorter. It's just equals max for the same range, B2 to B30, and then hit enter. So the maximum number of, again, classes missed by a particular student, 34. It just looks for the biggest number in a range of numbers. And oppositely, the minimum function. I can guess what this one is, but again, it will scan a large group of numbers and look for the smallest number. And it's equal, again, it knows what I was going to do. So again, sometimes Google will even predict based on what's beside it and based on some of the calculations you've done above, we want this exact one suggested by Google. So it's the min function equals min B2 to B30. So it's going to look for the smallest number from B2 to B30. And then enter. So the smallest number here, because I see it right here, there's 3 of them, is 0. So the smallest number of absences was 0. So even with this kind of slightly larger again, grouping of numbers, you may have been able to quickly pick out the biggest number and the smallest number. But when people are doing scientific experiments or analyzing a lot of data, the information doesn't always jump out at you that quickly. That's why we use the maximum function and the minimum function. Okay, so summing up. So we learned how to use the sum function. Again, finding or adding up a large group of numbers. We learned how to use the average function, finding the average or the mean of a large group of numbers. We learned how to use the maximum function, finding the largest value in a cell range. And lastly, we learned how to use the minimum function, finding the smallest number in a cell range. If you have any questions, make sure to drop by Google Classroom or our Google Meet. Have a good day, guys.